Hello and thank you for joining us for today's webinar. This session is being delivered as part of our Tourism Enterprise Development Programme. We've been working closely with industry over the last number of months to shape and roll out this programme and respond as best we all can to the unprecedented events of 2020 and the ongoing impact of COVID-19 on the industry. You can access a range of COVID-19 support materials as well as signing up for webinars and expert advice on tourismni.com and covid19.tourismni.com. We've initially prioritised financial support, including financial planning, setting financial targets, cost-based analysis and pricing, as these are areas that continue to be raised with us by the industry. We would encourage you to continue to feed in on priority areas. If you could complete the feedback form following today's webinar, we can continue to tailor the programme to your needs, or indeed at any time, just feedback through tourismni.com or covid19.tourismni.com. I hope you all found today's session useful and informative. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for attending this morning's webinar. I'm Michael Williamson, a director with ASM Chartered Accountants. And this morning we're going to be looking at the capacity and commercial impact calculators for accommodation providers. By way of introduction, as you heard from Rosemarie there at the start, that we all realise how difficult a time it is for tourism and hospitality, and each one of us, either viewing today and indeed ourselves, have been impacted in some shape or form by COVID-19. And indeed, one of the challenges we face going forward is that when return to normality is going to happen really is anyone's guess at this point, albeit there is quite a lot of hope on the horizon now, thankfully, and one would hope that 2021 is going to be a much better year than 2020. That notwithstanding, we are where we are today, and that makes planning difficult and indeed decision making even more difficult for those of you who are operators once you start getting back into reopening, hopefully in a couple of weeks' time. In particular, smaller businesses which tend to have a constraint in terms of resources, particularly where financial analysis and financial advice is concerned, just adds to the uncertainty, and that's been well recognised across the island. In fact, with both Tourism Northern Ireland and Fáilte Ireland, who have worked in a collaborative spirit in terms of generating these particular calculators. So, you know, the background really, which I'll get into in a bit more detail in a moment, is that they have been developed very much with those issues or challenges in mind, and they've been really designed around helping businesses where they don't really have the in-house resource themselves, and to try and help them make better decisions. So in today's webinar, the 5 areas I'm going to cover is a little bit of background to the calculators, how they work, so that you understand, in essence, what they're doing, and we'll see some practical examples of them in action as well. There are a whole range of calculators now for the accommodation sector, so, you know, of those that are viewing, there will be a calculator there to suit you. We can't run through all of them today, but there already is a tutorial video and indeed guidance notes already on the Tourism NI website for each of the calculators, so that's already available. I'm going to show you how to use them, so I've got some worked examples and some of the outputs from them, which hopefully you will find very useful. There are also a whole raft of government supports, and it's important that you regularly review what's available on the Tourism NI website, and I'll give you the links to those towards the back end of the presentation today. And as we know from the executive yesterday, there's more measures being put in place, and therefore, you know, that material will be updated probably over the course of the next couple of days when the detail of the workings of those new interventions become a bit clearer. So please keep an eye on those. And then at the back end, just for those of you that don't have an in-house accountant or in-house financial resource and need to talk to your accountant, perhaps some points, tips, ideas, and that you need to be talking to your accountant about to help you move forward. So in terms then of the actual capacity and commercial calculators themselves, well, they're a tool to help you make better informed business decisions. In my experience in this industry, which now runs into decades, all too often operators or owners make decisions on the basis of gut feeling. Quite often that's, you know, they're right, But I think in the current climate we're in, that's maybe not good enough anymore. And what we need to do is try and make decisions from an informed standpoint. And these calculators will help you do that. They are based on Excel spreadsheets. And they're really, as I say, I can't overemphasize the point, they're a tool to help you make decisions. So you'll get out of them what you put into them in terms of information. And they're there to test trading assumptions. As I've already mentioned, there's already a user guidance video for each of the individual accommodation calculators on the Tourism NI website. And even though they were developed initially as a response to COVID-19, you actually could use them well beyond that on an ongoing basis. It's entirely up to you. What does it do? Well, I suppose the trigger point really wasn't just COVID-19, but its impact in terms of reduced capacity across service areas. And that was a real concern to both Tourism NI and Fáilte Ireland at the outset, way back in March and April, when, you know, clearly the governments were deciding that whilst businesses could stay open at that time, the capacity of their bars, restaurants, and so on and so forth had to be materially reduced because of social distancing measures. And there was quite rightly, you know, points being made by the industry that probably if I could only run at 30% capacity, could I make money? And for many, you know, actually establishing what they could and couldn't do in terms of making money, or whether they could or they couldn't, wasn't that readily easily available to them. So the models were really developed with that, initially with that in mind, in terms of, if I have a capacity constraint, can I continue to make money? So that was really the starting point. But in addition to that, then, of course, some businesses have decided they will offer additional solutions to try and combat their capacity constraint rather. So it may well be that they decided to offer takeaway meals, for example, and the calculators have an inbuilt function there that allow you to look at other options that you may be considering offering and to test whether or not they're likely to be profitable. I'd much rather make that decision before I decide to spend money on something than find out 2 or 3 months in that actually the new service, if it was takeaway, for example, that actually don't make any money at it, because that just adds to your burden. For the more detailed calculators, they will help maximize the performance of each operating area during the transition period from being closed to being open with capacity constraints to being open on a normal business, by providing an analysis of the income and costs associated with your service lines in different areas. So, for example, if I cannot serve breakfast in my main breakfast room to all of my residents because of a capacity constraint, I have to find other ways of servicing that demand. And it may be room service as part of the solution. It may be that opening up another part of the hotel to take the overspill as part of the solution, or there may be other opportunities. But each of those brings with it a cost. And part of the analysis and the more detailed calculators where that may be a requirement in terms of providing that service will be to identify which of those actually is the more profitable solution for you. And if some make a loss, it'll give you the materials to ask questions about, can I reduce the cost of providing that service to turn that slight loss into a profit, therefore lessening the burden on your business. The calculators really are designed around looking at your business in 4-week blocks. So you will get that performance analysis on a daily and a weekly basis, and then an overall summary. But we'll see that as we come to it. As I said, there's a number of calculators, and the more sophisticated of them all is the hotels and guesthouse calculator, and we will be looking at that later, but we will also be looking at one of the other calculators as well. And as I said, you know, the hotel calculator, the hotel and guesthouse calculator rather, can take account of different types of service delivery because of social distancing, and it actually will also highlight to you if you have a capacity problem in your room, and will force you to think about using other areas in the hotel to service demand. And as I noted as well, it will produce a whole range of key performance indicators such as average spend, average cost of a meal, average payroll cost per meal served, and so on. They fall out of the calculator automatically. You don't necessarily have to add any more information in. So in effect, some of these KPIs, which I think would be useful to you, come free. And we will see examples of that shortly. Now, it all sounds very complicated, and I accept that, and probably when you see it on screen it will look complicated, but the reality is the calculators use the least amount of information possible. So Where we ask for information that may be used in subsequent weeks, you only enter the information once and it automatically carries the detail forward or the data forward into subsequent weeks. You can amend it if you want, for example, if you wanted to put a price change in or you wanted to change rates of pay. But if you don't need to do that, then once you put it in, it will fall into the subsequent 3 weeks. The model itself is highly automated, so as I say, even though it may look really complicated, and I suppose with the formalism behind it, it is, the amount of information you put in is the bare minimum that I believe you can get away with to get the type of results that it's going to produce. It is driven largely by formulas, and they can't be accidentally corrupted, so they're protected. And as I say, it will provide a summary performance and underlying detail where it's possible to produce that. So there are in total 5 separate calculators for the accommodation sector. There's a hotels and guest houses, bed and breakfast, a separate self-catering calculator, one for hostels and one for caravan and camping providers. And you'll see down the left-hand side of that particular table there, all of the different functionality for each of the calculators. So unsurprisingly, the hotel and guest houses one is the more complex because of the range of features and the range of services that hotels in particular will provide. And we'll have a look at that in a moment or two. As you can see with bed and breakfast, pretty straightforward. It's accommodation and it's breakfast. And the other ones tend to be accommodation only. Now, in each one, there is an options calculator, and we'll see that in action later on, where you may be providing additional services, or you may be considering providing additional services. And the whole point of the calculator is it'll hopefully allow you to test your assumptions as to whether or not you should progress with it, because if it isn't going to make you money, then really you shouldn't be doing it. And we'll see those in action. The bed and breakfast, self-catering, hostel and camping and caravanning calculators are very similar, in fact, and therefore we'll take a look at the bed and breakfast one as part of our practical demonstration in a few minutes time, and really the way it processes information and the type of information that you have to feed into the model will be very similar for self-catering, hostels, caravan and camping. I'm afraid we just don't have sufficient time to run through all of them, but as I've already stated, each of them already has a how to use them video and guidance notes already on the Tourism Northern Ireland website. So for example, and those options are at the bottom of the little table. It could be that a hostel, for example, is planning or already offers a cafe facility. And again, there's an opportunity there, if you're not offering it, to test whether or not it makes commercial sense to do so. And if you do already offer it, whether reopening, given constraints or given perhaps what you think is going to be the footfall using it in the short run, whether or not it's wise to open currently. Okay, now we need to switch over the screen now to look at the first calculator, and the first one I'm going to look at is going to be the hotels and guest house calculator. So please, those of you that are from other accommodation types, if I could ask you please to bear with us. This is the more complex of all of the calculators, but by the same token, we'll get on to one of the other calculators after we run through this. So when you open the calculator, or you download the calculator off the Tourism NI website, you're presented with a screen in the hotels and guest house calculator, and you'll see at the bottom here a whole series of tabs, which are those different functions or areas that I said are shown in the little table there that it can accommodate. So we have bedrooms separately, breakfast, restaurant, food outlet 2 could be a cafe, for example. Outlet 3 could be the bar. You then have, obviously, in many cases, function facilities and special event space. So there's a little separate calculator for that, a separate calculator for leisure, and then an overall summary. Now, I'm not going to go through each of these tabs. I think once we show you the nature of the type of information that needs to be loaded into it, it'll become fairly obvious. Now, the calculator itself only allows you to enter information to those cells that are colored pink. Everything else is automated. So in this particular example, if we have a little drop-down menu here, lets you select a month. So if, for example, if we decide that we're going to look at December 2020, I've already pre-populated the model with information just to try and save a bit of time, but you will see here that it's asking for the number of bedrooms in your hotel or your guest house, and you enter that and it automatically populates each day in the first week that we're going to look at. And if you have rooms off for whatever reason, then change the number of bedrooms that you have available each day in here, because that will actually be used in calculating the average occupancy rate. For the moment, we'll assume that 50 rooms are available each day. In some of the cells, you'll see a little red triangle in the right-hand corner, and that means that there's a little accompanying note in there that just gives you a little bit of additional guidance. So it does. So you don't always have to keep referring back to the guidance notes that you can print off the Tourism NI website. So where you see that, the little, if you just roll over the pointer onto the cell with the little red triangle, the note will automatically pop up. So in this case, what we're saying in week 1 is, well, look, we're going to open up on Monday, so therefore there's my expected number of bookings, or my confirmed number of bookings each day for that week. They put in the number of sleepers because this will dictate potentially the number of breakfasts that you're going to serve. That then gives us a total sleepers calculation. And in here, if you are not offering an inclusive rate with breakfast, then you put the number of breakfasts that are already prepaid into this section, into this row here. In this case, we're just assuming everybody's going to get breakfast. In this row then, we put in what is our average daily rate, excluding VAT. And then if we make an allocation, or if you make an allocation for breakfast, then whatever that allocation is out of your room rate, slot it in underneath. So that means then our ADR is going to be £70 with £10 allocation to go to breakfast. And we'll see that in a few minutes' time. Next thing we need to do then is we need to tell it staffing levels. So and what we need to do is just the number of staff that we're going to use for the week. Now, we don't need to put them in this case for every day. We're going to put them in for the week. So the number of hours in particular that staff are going to work, or each grade of staff, or each pay grade of staff are going to work in the week, we slot in here. We then put the hourly rate of pay in. The model is already pre-populated with an estimate for employers' national insurance and pension contributions and an allocation for holiday pay. You can change those. Different businesses will inevitably have different rates, but the broad rule of thumb in terms of averages is 10.4 and 13%. So they're already in the model and will carry forward to subsequent weeks, but you can change them. If, for example, you thought yours was 9, then populate it with 9 and it will automatically update everything else. In the case of servicing bedrooms, it will automatically calculate the number of hours required in terms of housekeeping staff. So you tell the model how many minutes it's going to take to service a bedroom. And that's probably one area in the accommodation segment that has probably caused quite a bit of difficulty, because obviously with COVID-19 and the additional requirements in terms of room servicing, that's been taking longer. So in this case, we've assumed in this week it's going to take 60 minutes per room, and each full-time member of the housekeeping team works 7.5 hours a day, and then that will then calculate how many hours. In this case, we've sold 90 rooms in the week, or we expect to sell 90 rooms in a week, so there's going to be 90 hours at these rates of pay, and that's what it's going to cost over there, and that will come back into the model. So you can change these, you can type over these, you can, where it's a pink cell, you can enter, you can change the names. So, you know, that you could call that maids, for example, if that's the way you want to, categorize it. So anything that's in a pink box, you can actually edit it, so you can. Front desk, concierge staff, if you have it. Then the only other thing you need to do then is enter some room expense details. And you can either do this as a cost per room, or you can do it as a percentage of turnover, whichever way you typically calculate it, or the information you have to hand. So in this case, we're making an assumption that the laundry costs are £4 a room, the cleaning materials are £1 a room, and so on. There are also some fixed costs per week that you can add in. And again, this may be, for example, if you offer satellite television or Sky TV in your rooms, for the sake of argument, and it costs you £12 per room per week, you would enter that in there. As I say, alternatively, you can put a percentage in. If you inadvertently put a number and a percentage, the model has to decide which one of those is going to take, and the little note here explains that it will give preference to the cost per room rather than the percentage. So put one or the other in. Ideally, don't put both in. And in essence, that's all you need to do on the accommodation side. What it then does is it takes all of that information and pulls it into a little summary for every day. And so it shows you your rooms revenue here, net of breakfasts, of course, for each day of the week. It then shows you your payroll costs. So it does an automatic calculation based on number of bedrooms sold. It then looks at the other costs that you've entered down below, and it allocates that again on the basis of bedroom bookings. It then has departmental fixed costs in there, which, for example, is your television, or rather your Sky service if you're providing that, because whether the room's occupied or not, that's going to be there. So it adds that in, and then it tells you whether or not you're making a profit for that week. So in this case, we haven't made a profit that week, other than a small profit on on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. But overall, we've lost £365 that week. Now, if we're in a loss situation, the model will then tell you approximately how many additional room sales you would need that week to break even. Now, it's only an approximation because it depends on the different room rates on different days and the different costs on different days. But what it's telling us that, look, roughly, if we could sell 8 rooms more that week at £70, for example, a room, net of breakfast and net of VAT, then we're going to break even. If that's a positive, in other words, if you're making a profit in rooms division, then that will just be 0. What it then does is it does a little analysis down below that, and it shows us the occupancy rate by day, the average room rate, the revenue per available room for those of you that look at this data, the payroll cost per occupied room. Obviously, where we've got a very small occupancy rate, we're carrying quite a lot of fixed costs like front desk and so on. So you can see that it varies from day to day, but it gives you the overall average for the week. Other departmental variable costs are constant because they rise in line with sales income. The fixed cost per room, again, will vary from day to day based on occupancy because we're spreading those costs over a greater number of rooms or a lesser number of rooms as each day passes. The total cost per room and the profit or loss per room. That additional analysis falls out automatically. Now, as I said, everything else scrolls across to the subsequent weeks, with the exception of your room sales and the number of staff hours worked. So all we would have to enter then in week 2 again is, and we're assuming that all rooms are available to let, is the number of rooms expected to be booked each day, the number of sleepers each day, the average room rate, and it's automatically pulled that across from week 1. But you can change this if you want. There's no issue with that. And then the only other data you need to change in here is the number of hours worked by staff by pay grade in each of these areas. It'll automatically pull across the hourly rate, the employer's national insurance and pension rates, and the holiday pay rates from the first week. And everything else down here in this section again is automatically pulled across from the first week, but you can change it if you wish. So week 2 then, slightly different picture now. We lost money on week 1, on Monday of week 2, Tuesday and Wednesday, but then we started making money in the subsequent days of the week, and we ended up with a small surplus that week of £216. And again, a detailed analysis here in terms of occupancy rate, RevPAR, cost per occupied room. Now, why are some of these things important? Because you might say, well, you know, on days when I'm going to be quiet, you know, I'm trying to recover that cost, my cost over a very small number of bedroom sales. Are there things I could be doing to reduce my costs on days when I have less than 10 rooms in the house, for example? So it won't necessarily give you the answer of what you should be doing, but it's certainly giving you the material to start thinking about the areas that you need to look at. So that's why this sort of analysis, I feel, is really important in terms of helping you make better informed decisions. Week 3 and week 4 run on the same format. Everything's dragged across again from the prior week, other than the number of room sales, the number of sleepers, and the number of hours that your staff work in each department. And again, you may decide that if it's a slow week, you don't really need 40 hours of housekeeping supervisory or manager, or maybe you don't need the same number of staff on in reception or whatever. That's you know your business is better than me, so that's the sort of decision that you should be making. And week 4 similarly. Now, as we scroll across, in this yellow area or cream area is a summary. What it then does is it distills all of those results then for that 4-week period, and it will do a little calculation for the full month. We're not asking you to put the full month in, and indeed you might choose only to put 2 weeks information in. It will still scale that up on a pro rata basis then to give you a projection for the full month. So in this case, as you saw, we lost money in week 1, but we made a little bit of profit in week 2, and then we made some more realistic profits in week 3 and 4. So for the 28 days, it gave us a profit of that. For the full month, it'll prorate that, and that'll give us in theory a profit of £6,800. And if you choose to put in the results for the same month last year, i.e. December 2019, then you can put them in here and it will show you the year-on-year change, increase or decrease. So in this case, our payroll costs were 57.7% of turnover this year so far, they're only 51.8%, but our profits were 31.5% of turnover this year, they're only 18.4%, and there's the actual physical change in absolute terms and in percentage terms if you want to look at that. So really, for those hotels or guest houses that are looking at reopening, hopefully, as I say, in a couple of weeks' time, you know, there's a very simple tool that looks complicated, and indeed the mathematics behind it are quite complex. But in fact, once you've entered your first week's data in, the rest of it's really quite simple unless you're going to make changes. And so, as I say, it looks probably more complex than it is. Moving on to breakfast then. So what the model does is it automatically drags across the number of breakfast guests the following day. So on Monday we had 8 sleepers in the house, and of course they're going to have breakfast on Tuesday morning, and so on and so forth. So in week 1 we weren't open the previous day, so there are no sleepers, but in week 1 you would have to physically fill in that number there. What this part of the model also does is it asks a simple question: what would your typical capacity be in your breakfast room or your restaurant? How many times would you typically have turned the table over? So that gives you in theory a capacity of 150 covers. But due to COVID-19 restrictions, what's a reduction in your typical capacity? In this case, we're assuming 70. So we're down to 30 covers instead of 70. And would your turnover ratio still be the same? Well, probably yes, but of course you may have a different experience. And what we then do is we then enter down here the number of breakfasts that we're going to serve in our main breakfast room or a restaurant each day. So in this case, we have a capacity of roughly 45 taken from here. And the only day that we breach 45 covers is actually on Sunday. So we're going to do 5 room service. For one reason or other, we're getting the restaurant redecorated on Saturday, so we're going to do all of those as room service, and we'll see how we put the costs in for that. So the key thing here is that everybody who's booked in for breakfast or who is entitled to breakfast, we've allocated them somewhere. So these numbers should be 0, and we can make up the shortfall in this room by allocating across any of these other service areas. So room service, you might offer a grab and go option, or you might open a temporary breakfast room. And again, you can rename that to whatever suits you. Do we offer a surcharge, or do we make a surcharge rather for room service deliveries? Well, in this case, we're saying we do, of £5. So we enter it once, and it automatically drags that across every other day in the month. But again, we can go in and change that on any day that we particularly want to. So scrolling on down then, what other information do we need to add in? Well, we're back to this again. Main breakfast room, how many waiting staff do we need? Number of hours worked each day. Now we're doing this calculation. Rate of pay, enter it once. It's already, the model's already populated with these 2 figures, but again, you can change them. Kitchen, how many kitchen staff do we need? How many hours? and that should be readily available to you from a roster, any rota planning. And in the case of room service, we've decided that, look, Saturday's going to be really busy, so we need a dedicated member of staff in room service on that particular day. We can't really service it from staff out of the restaurant because we're just going to have so much demand and running around. And again, then back down to the bottom, cost of sales percentage. What do we think our breakfast and room service food cost of sales is going to be? If we offer a grab and go service, what's the cost of sales going to be? Any other variable costs that we think we have, we can either enter them here as a percentage or as a dedicated amount per cover. So in the case of grab and go, even though we're not offering it in week one, say £3 for packaging, for example. Any other expenses then per week, on average it's £100 for linen, maybe kitchen cleaning is £100. And again, you can go in and edit these and name these whatever way you want. And that's all you have to put in on the breakfast side. And what it does then, if we scroll up to the summary, which again is this sort of beige coloured area, we have no breakfast on Monday, so there's nothing in there. So our breakfast revenues then are across here for each of the individual days, and we've a total for the 6 days of £1,600. Our food cost of sales was just under 28% because of the mix that we have, and also this calculation includes the tray charge for room service, so that drives this number down. Our payroll costs were 59%, or just under £1,000. Our other fixed costs for the week are 350, and this would be like the packaging, for example, that we had for some of the additional variable costs that we put in down below. So what it's telling this week is, well, look, we lost £217, and some days we made money and some days we lost money. So we lost £1.43 per cover. If we scroll down here, then we have the details of revenues for breakfast served in the main restaurant. We didn't use a temporary breakfast room, so there's nothing in there. And then revenues from room service, which we only offered in 2 days. And there's the food cost of sales. There's, bear in mind that also includes a tray charge. There's the payroll costs for operating room service, and that includes an allocation of kitchen costs as well. Other costs of sales, and that gives us a £228 contribution to our fixed cost during the week, which is 350 quid. Whereas in the main dining room, we actually lost £88 that week. So we made zero contribution to that 350 quid. So really, if that was going on and on every week and we were showing a negative in one of these service areas, you would say, look, let's try and do this another way. Let's not do the main breakfast room because the setup and the cleaning takes so long. It's maybe better to try and push it into room service if we don't have that many sleepers in the house, because it makes us more money because of the tray charge and so on. So it will break this out as much as it possibly can do. Again, as was the case with the other calculator, all of that data then is pulled across into subsequent weeks. So all you have to do is pull in information in terms of where you're going to serve those breakfasts in each particular day. So if it's not in the main if they're not all going to be accommodated in the main restaurant, where are they going to be? In this case, this week we are going to offer a grab and go option. So again, as long as this is zero, it means we've allocated breakfast to somewhere in the building. And again, simply because we have a capacity constraint, we have to offer it somewhere. And again, all we then need to load up is our staffing hours for different area of operations. So we've got room service in here, we've got our kitchens here again, and we've got some staff in here for our grab and go options, which we're going to offer on the weekend. And back up. So in this particular week, then we lost £135 overall. Again, we didn't have that many breakfasts, but because we're having to disperse them across other parts of the building where there's additional cost, we lost money. We made money in the restaurant this time around, £81 contribution to our fixed costs. Our room service in this example, we made £70, and our issue then we made £64. So we did in grab and go, all contributing to this £350 of fixed cost. But of course, it wasn't enough to cover the full 350, but at least they're making a contribution towards it. So we're moving in the right direction. And again, in week 3 and week 4, all we have to do is populate with the number of breakfasts, where they're going to be served, and the number of staff hours each day by staff category. And if we look at week 4, we can see in this case, using these estimates, we actually made money every day. We made £723, £795 made in the main restaurant against our fixed cost of £350, 116 from the temporary breakfast room, 161 from room service, and we only made £1 from grab and go. And I suppose if it was me, I'd be questioning, well, that's dangerously close to losing money. So why have the problems of offering grab and go? Can we not encourage those customers to use one of the other options that we have here? And let's just take this out of the equation, because we actually may have some cost savings if we push that in here. We won't need to pull the staff costs over. So again, highly detailed below for very little information, and once again a summary. And as you can see, we weren't open, we had no breakfast on the first Monday of week 1, so therefore we only have 27 days of revenue. And we'll do a calculation then that says, well, for the full month then, if we have only 27 days of information in here or 14, it will scale it up to the full month. And if you want to put in the previous year's data for comparison purposes, you can slot that in here. And again, it will tell us the absolute and percentage change in turnover, payroll costs, and profitability, which again, you may want to see, you may not. Looking at the next tab then is restaurant, and it's a little bit more complicated in this particular model because we look at it at both lunch and dinner time, but you're really not being asked to put that much more information in. So same idea, number of covers, table turnover ratio for lunch, table turnover ratio for dinner, and then over here your reduction in your capacity due to COVID-19 measures. And of course that could change between now and when you get fully opened on a permanent basis. And again, those turnover ratios, you can amend those. And what we need to tell the model here is the expected number of sit-in covers for lunch. And this is, we're looking at, well, let's look at week 1. The expected number of covers for lunch here sitting in, if you offer a takeaway service, then you would put them in there, for example. And again, where you're going to service them, there's the main dining room. And if we have to serve them somewhere else, how are we going to do that? In this case, we're offering room service again, we're offering a terrace service, and we can open additional indoor space. But again, you can name those over here. So that's everybody that we expect to get. We're going to feed them somewhere. What's our projected net of VAT average spend per cover? So we'll assume it's £15 for food and £4 for beverage. We're not offering room service, and we're not offering takeaway at lunchtime, so let's ignore that. Dinner then, expected number of covers for dinner. How many are we going to place in the main restaurant? And for those that we can't accommodate in the restaurant, how are we going to service them? So we've a little bit here in room service, and we're going to open the terrace on a Saturday night if we have one. And again, what is the average spend? In this case, we're assuming the net of VAT average spend for dinner is 25, for food 750 for beverage, room service average spend 20, for food 8 for beverage, and a surcharge for room service delivery of £5 per order. We're not offering takeaway, so we'll not put anything in there. And similar to earlier on, now all we need to do is analyse then the number of hours by service type in these pink areas. So for lunch, the number of hours each day for waiting staff, the number of hours for the supervisor, different grades of different rates of pay in the kitchen, how many hours each day. We're also offering terrace service, so there's a number of hours for terrace service in terms of dedicated staff who are looking after that area of the operation. And similarly for dinner, and there's a slight change in the colour here, as you can see, just to denote that this is dinner rather than lunch. Again, same idea, number of hours, rate of pay, and they will be carried forward to subsequent weeks. Kitchen hours for dinner service, and we're offering terrace service on the Saturday night in week 1. Then we just scroll on down a bit further. Cost of sales for food at lunchtime. We're not offering takeaway, there's 30% in there anyway. Beverage cost of sales 32%. Other variable costs for lunch, for sit-in 5%, for room service 10%. Maybe it's packaging that's being put in so that we're not using plates, for example. and ditto for dinner, the same type of information. And you can put these additional costs in again, either as a percentage, or you can put them in as an absolute amount per cover. It's entirely up to you. It will decide if you inadvertently put in both. That I think it prioritizes the percentage in this case. And then any other expenses typically you would find in the restaurant for the week. So linen charges, for example, if you had room setup costs or kitchen cleaning. And again, you can name these in whatever way suits your business. And that's it. You put all that in for week one, and it pulls it across for the subsequent weeks. And then it gives us the analysis here. So it does of our summary. So lunch food, 300 on Monday, lunch beverage, £80, dinner food, dinner beverage. There was no room service on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, so no room service charges. Our total overall food cost of sales for each day, our beverage cost of sales for each day, that's for combined lunch and dinner. Our payroll costs combined for the day, other costs and our fixed costs per week, apportioned on the basis of turnover, but it'll still add up to £900 for the week. And what this is telling us that we've made £3,000 for that particular week, which is a ratio of 21% on our sales. And then again, it analyzes by detailed results. So lunch in the sit-in restaurant, there's the revenue each day. There's our cost of sales each day. So 28%, 32% of the cost of sales ratios. There's the allocation of staffing. So nearly 50% on staff for the week, and there's our other costs, other variable costs. So we're making this from the restaurant, making a £699 contribution to that fixed cost for the week of £900. If we scroll on down, we offered terrace service for lunch on 3 days. So there's our revenue, our food and bev cost of sales, our staff. So we made a £145 contribution. Looking at dinner then, again, the analysis of dinner broken down by sales type, cost of sales and staff costs and other variable costs. So we made a £2,692 contribution to fixed costs from that particular service area during the week. Oops, just jumped down a wee bit too quickly there. Room service, same idea. For dinner, we made £176. And for the terrace service, we made £200. So they're all making a decent contribution towards a fixed cost. So they all work for us in that particular example. And again, pulling that information across then in the subsequent weeks, all you need to fill in is your number of covers per day for each of the subsequent 3 weeks, where they're going to be serviced, either in the main room or elsewhere, for lunch and for dinner, and your number of staff hours. All of the other information gets dragged across automatically if you choose to use it, but you can change it, as I said earlier. And the summary for each day, or each week rather, and each day is shown here. And then we have an overall summary again. So once again, that scales it up for the number of days in a month, and we can put in last year's results if we choose to do so. So we have a second one, which is exactly the same for a second food outlet if you offered it. We also have another one, outlet 3, which could be a bar, for example. So really the only change, a bar that serves food, for instance, so the only change really in here versus the restaurant or the food outlet 2 is that it actually gives you a bit of space just to add in beverage only guests. So it does, but entering the data is the same as for the other ones. So all you add in is the number of beverage guests, the average spend, and whether they're going to be served in the main bar, for example, or somewhere else, because again, of a capacity constraint. And if you're serving food in that same outlet, you put exactly the same data in that you put into the other calculators. So it's really, it looks complex, but really once you put that first week's information in, and bear in mind this is the more complex of all of the models, it's really straightforward after that. These other ones we don't have time to touch on, but there is an overall summary then that draws together the results of the inputs that you have in all of those tabs, and it gives you a little analysis here by different area of activity in the hotel or guest house, what your profit was per day per week for each of the days over the 4-week period. It then summarizes all of that in terms of total projected turnover for the full 31 days in this case, for the current year, December 2020, the departmental profit, and and again, it then allows you to add in the results from last year, so you can then see where the differentials are. And in this particular case, we didn't put any information in for room hire because we weren't running any events this year, and we didn't reopen our leisure facilities if we would have had them. Whereas last year we had that level of turnover in each, and of course we're seeing 100% decline in that turnover because they're not open. So that's the hotel model, hotel stroke guest house model. What I want to do now is, as I say, there are a number of other models. That's the most complex one. I want to have a bit of a look now at the bed and breakfast demo model, because it's going to be very similar to the self-catering, to the hostels, and to the caravan and camping site model. So again, you know, the type of information that you're going to be required to enter is going to be very similar for all of those models. So if we look at one, we're in essence looking at them all. So when you open the document, you open the spreadsheet, this is what you'll be presented with, but all the pink boxes will be empty. And again, we choose from the drop-down menu here which month. So if it was for February, for example, you can see that the number of days automatically changes. So if we tell it that in this case, we're looking at December, the number of bedrooms on your premises, in this particular B&B example, I'm assuming there's 5. If they're not all available each day, tell it what is available. The number of rooms booked each day, then you add in here. The total number of sleepers or breakfasts for the following morning is driven off the number of rooms sold times the average number of sleepers. If there's a change to that, you can tell it the number of breakfasts each day in here. And your average selling price, net of VAT, it's not going to split breakfast out separately. And any other income that you might have, if, for example, I don't know, if you, for instance, provide a takeaway lunch or something, you could put it in there. Just put in here, if you have staff in your bed and breakfast that you use from time to time, and you know that you're going to have them, for example, just come and help with breakfast service or cook breakfast, then put the cost in for the week in here, and this little note tells you, look, don't forget to add 10.4% on to whatever your rate of pay is to cover national insurance contributions. Any other direct costs that you have for the week, so for example, the food costs, the food that you're going to buy for breakfast, any cleaning materials you might use, any items in the room that you may put, it might be fruit, for example, and any online booking commissions that you think you're going to be charged for the week, slot those in there. Any annual business-related costs, put them in here. So, for example, if you subscribe to a trade association, it costs you £500 a year, for instance, slot that in there. And again, you can change these whatever way you want. If your insurance is, for example, in this case, £750 a year, and you spend roughly £100 a month on repairs or touching up or painting or whatever, then put that in there. And you won't need to enter these again unless you want to change them in subsequent weeks. If you have a business-related loan, in other words, a loan that you took out to develop the business, maybe by adding bedrooms or whatever, put the annual amount in there, including interest and capital repayments. And that's all you need to do. And then it will now summarize it in terms of, there's your income each day, there's your payroll costs each day, your other variable costs each day, and your annual business expenses, which is at 2,450, and it's allocated on the basis of turnover each day. It then shows us a surplus before we're servicing any loan repayments. In this case, we made £180 this week, but we got £231 roughly of a loan to repay. So we're actually down 51 quid. And what the model then does is, if you're showing a negative, it says, well, look, if you sold another 3 rooms, you would get to roughly, if you sold another 3 rooms, you will get to break-even position. So if you're looking into the future and you're looking at the next couple of weeks, I think if I can only sell another 3 rooms, I can turn that negative into a positive or a break-even, then that's worth doing. And again, for the limited amount of information you put in, a little bit of additional data down here: average occupancy rate, room rate, revenue per available room, and obviously the higher that is, the better as you go through each week. The payroll cost per room, other departmental costs per occupied room, and when you scroll on down here, whether or not you make a profit or a loss per room. That's before taking off any charges, of course, for your loan repayments. And in essence, then what happens in subsequent weeks is all of that information, other than the number of rooms sold and the number of sleepers and other direct costs, is then automatically dragged across. So now we're saying we're selling a few more rooms this week than we did last week. We're going to sell 18 in total. Our food cost this week in terms of breakfast is going to be £100, £40 in cleaning materials, and so on and so on. And our payroll costs this week are going to be a little bit higher, £275. That's all we have to add in to subsequent weeks. And now it's telling us that not only did we make £408, but that was more than our loan repayments. So now we're well in the clear. It's £177 we made this week. And again, I haven't populated this for a full month, but you can see just how easy it is to use this model. And again, if we have a total summary here, so the revenues for each day, it knows we've only been open for 14 days, but we're going to be open for the full month. It'll do a calculation that says, look, overall this month, I think after you've paid your loan repayments, which are £1,000, you make £280 this month. Obviously, the more you populate this, then the more accurate this is going to become. And equally, if you have the information to hand, you can put the same data in for last year. Now, the options little tab at the bottom applies to all of the calculators, including the hotels one. In this case, for example, I'm just going to give you a quick demonstration. If, for instance, in this particular case, I owned a B&B and decided, look, I have a barn out there that I've converted into a nice meeting room, and I'm going to start selling it. I'm going to start offering it to the general public or to businesses. Then but I want to test whether or not it's going to make me any money. Then what I need to do is have a think about what I think my bookings are going to be, or how many bookings I think I can generate in a week, how many guests are going to be or attendees at each of those meetings. I'm going to have to provide them with food and beverage and so on. So what the average spend per cover is going to be, what my food cost of sales is likely to be. And in this case, they also want, not only do they want lunch, but they want breakfast on arrival, and I'm going to give them croissants and so on. So that's only £5 a head. And the expected cost of sales on that is 45%. And it could be, you know, for instance here, you can change the name of these. I've called that breakfast on arrival, but it could just as easily be cakes and fruit, for example. And it will automatically, oh, it could help if I could spell, wouldn't it? It will automatically drag that down, so it will to here. So this is now called cakes and fruit instead of breakfast. I'm still charging them £5. And the only other, if I've any other costs associated with operating this particular barn as a little meeting space, I can put those additional costs either as a percentage of sales income or as an absolute amount each day. So it might be, I've estimated it's cost me £10 on electricity for the sake of argument. And again, if I have any staff costs, I put them in here, rate of pay, all this stuff gets dragged across the subsequent weeks, and any other business costs that I might have. So perhaps my insurance is an additional £10 a week now because I'm making that space available, and I reckon I'm going to have to spend £25 a week maybe on repairs and maintenance on average. And that's all you have to do. And what this is telling us is that even with a modest income in this example of £525, I've got food cost of sales in there of 35%, and payroll costs of £81, I'm going to make 292 quid in that example. And again, you can pull that across for every week and add that down for every week. And it could be something else. You've decided maybe you're going to offer packed lunches. You can test that using this particular tab. And again, it will give us a summary for the whole month, an estimate for the full month. And since it's a new service, we won't have any corresponding results from last year. So hopefully that was reasonably straightforward. As I say, there's already a video and guidance notes on the Tourism NI website. At this point, I'm going to come out of the calculators, and because there's some more slides that I need to talk through, and in particular show you where you can gather other information from the Tourism NI website. Plus then I wanted to have a quick chat with you about some points that you might take to your accountant before I host any questions. Okay, so just a little change over screens there. So the Tourism NI website, actually, if you haven't seen it, has quite a lot of additional information in there. And you really should take the opportunity of looking on the website. You can see the links here for government support information, and that's been updated really day and daily, and particularly, as I said at the outset, with the announcement yesterday of the executive of providing yet more support for the industry, and indeed I think there's some specific support in there for B&Bs. As the detail of that and the working of it and the way to make the claim comes through, that will all be posted up on that particular website. So you've got the link there to the section that will provide that information. There's also a financial modelling template, which is like a cash flow, and that's also available on the COVID-19 support site and TNI, and again, there's a link for it there. And recently introduced by Tourism NI has been an inquiry helpline, which you may not be aware of. So again, you can find that on that support centre, but that's actually the telephone number. So it is if you need to phone, and someone there, if you have any queries, and try and help you as best they possibly can. So there is an awful lot of material on the website, and please use it, because it has been developed in response to the current crisis that we all face. Now, the final couple of slides then, in terms of working with your accountant. Many of you probably, you might see your accountant once or twice a year, and I think in this time it's probably more critical than ever that you try and spend a bit more time with them as you possibly can do. For those slightly larger businesses, it's slightly smaller businesses may only have their accounts produced annually or at a push quarterly, and my view would be that you probably need that information much more regularly if you can get it more regularly from your accountant or whoever provides that service for you. Some of you may be using things like QuickBooks or Xero or whatever, but if your normal routine is really only looking at your accounts once a year or once every 3 months, my view and my strong advice would be that you need to do that much more regularly, because you can't really pick up trends or issues that you could act on if you're only seeing them once every 3 months or once a year. You've essentially lost that amount of time to put remedial action in place. But of course, there can always be a cost with that. So I think that's a conversation that you need to have with your accountant if they're producing that information for you, and what the additional cost would be in terms of getting information on a more regular basis. If it's annually, at least move it to quarterly. If you're getting it quarterly and you're a bit of a larger business, my suggestion would be that you try and look at it monthly. Also, those models, as you can see, generate a huge amount of key performance indicators: average spend, average payroll cost per room, and so on and so forth. Now, you may not ever use all of that information, and indeed you may not use any of it, but if there's stuff in there, if some of that material is of real use to you, and I suspect you could be using quite a lot of it and should be using quite a lot of it, then you will need to provide your accountant with additional information that allows them to calculate those key performance indicators. So agree what you want, decide what you want, agree with your accountant what you want, and decide how you're going to provide that additional information to them. Also, if trading at a loss, well, it says currently, obviously once you reopen, as you can see from some of those calculators, it'll give you an indication of how many additional sales you need to break even. If your overall businesses are trading at a loss, then that's a conversation you need to be having with your accountant. How much more do we need to do in terms of turnover or room sales or whatever to at least break even? And that includes servicing any debts that you have, because of course profit doesn't equal cash flow in most cases. Also, if you have new service ideas, talk those through with your accountant, or you can use the models in the manner in which I've just shown you. And although I only looked at 2 of the 5 models, all 5 models have that provision in there. Also think about cost reduction opportunities, including your fixed costs. What can be done? For instance, in some of your businesses, you'll have probably a fixed amount that you're paying every week for loans. Can they be rearranged if you haven't already done that? If you're paying a rent for something and it's a fixed rent, is there an opportunity to convert that rent into a turnover-based rent? Now, for many of you that won't be practical, but for some of you it may be. So just because it's a fixed cost, don't rule out that you can't do something with it. It's only a fixed cost until you change it, or you get agreement to change it. So again, have those conversations with your accountant. Also think about the impact of moderate price increases on your income. I mean, we had the same amount in there for rooms revenue and breakfast and lunch and dinner every day. Certainly my experience in dealing with some businesses has been that where they've made modest but fairly frequent price increases, now it isn't always possible, and accept that, they actually don't face any resistance to it. So don't be afraid of moving your prices if you think you need to, because the one thing is the cost of you doing business has gone up for all the reasons we've discussed earlier. And I think, people do expect that they're going to be paying more, because we see every time we go to the supermarket that we're probably paying more than we did a short while ago for some products. So don't be afraid to adjust your prices either. And importantly as well, talking to your accountants and going back to the information that's available on Tourism NI website, are all of the government supports that you are entitled to or are available to you being maximised. They're there for a reason. They're there to help the industry. It's not a perfect world, so you won't get everything you want, but make sure, for goodness sake, that you're getting your fair share of whatever government support is available to you. So look, that's it from me for the moment.